Good evening and welcome. This is a meeting of the Special Education Advisory Committee of the Halton District School Board for Tuesday, February the 8th, 2022. Given the need to practice social distancing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we're holding this meeting remotely through a video conference. This meeting is being recorded. In accordance with Ontario Regulation 463-97 and the guidelines effective February the 1st, 2021, any meeting of the Board of Trustees and/or committee meetings which are open to the public must be live streamed and be able to take questions from the public. The purpose is to foster two-way participation during these meetings. To comply with this, SEAC will be using a Google form which is attached to each agenda, distributed in advance of the meetings and posted on the HDSB SEAC website page. Questions posed during the live stream meetings of SEAC may be answered during that meeting, particularly those related to agenda items, or at the following meeting at the discretion of the chair. For efficiency, multiple questions received that are similar in nature may be grouped together at the discretion of the chair and/or vice chair. Questions will not be attributed. Notations will be made that multiple people ask the same question. Any questions that contain language that is hateful or discriminatory will not be considered. First of all, we're going to start with a roll call to record who's in attendance. Lucille is not here with us tonight, so I'm going to make that roll call. So please answer yes or present if you're here. So first of all, we'll start with trustees. Tracy?
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm here.
Heather, I saw you.
Good evening, everyone.
Joanna?
Joanna is sending her regrets tonight.
Okay, and Margot? Do we see Margot? No?
I see her. She's waving her hand.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. I can't see with my things. My camera's not seeing it. Okay, Yarlene.
I'm here.
Great. Jen from ABC. Okay, I understand that Lisa Cameron will be coming later. Candice from Community Living.
I'm here. Good evening.
Great. Easter Seals, Melissa.
I'm here. Sorry.
Great, that's great.
Thank
and
you.
Sarah.
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Great. Halton Down syndrome. Do we have Sophia? Nope. Okay. Rebecca? Nope. Okay. I'm here. Diane van der Bosch.
I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Aaron from Voice.
Aaron's here.
And Kathy from Voice.
Cassie may be in and out. I know she had some
Okay.
errands to run tonight, but
Great. James.
Here.
Great. Diane Miller, member at large. No. Okay. And then Lucille sent her regrets from Florida. Colette. So you.
Hi there. Good evening.
And Lorna.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, great. So we do have quorum and we can move forward. First of all, I'd like to start by honouring the land. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honour and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. So our first step now is to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review that. Are there any modifications or amendments that anybody would like to make? If so, could you put that in the chat? Not seeing any. Yarlene, would you like to motion the agenda?
Yes, go ahead. I'll motion the agenda.
Great. And Candice, would you like to second?
Yes, I second.
Okay. Does anybody have any abstentions or want to vote against the agenda? If so, please make yourselves known. And being seen, the agenda is approved as submitted. Secondly, we'll approve the minutes of the last meeting on January the 4th. Again, hopefully everybody's had a chance to review them. Are there any amendments or clarifications, changes that need to be made? Okay, none being put forward. Diane, would you like to propose a motion to approve the minutes?
I propose put a motion forward to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Great. Erin, would you like to second?
I did not attend the last meeting, so I don't think I should
Great.
be.
Melissa, were you here last meeting?
No, actually, I missed the last meeting too. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. James.
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay, great. Does anybody want to abstain or vote against the minutes as recorded? Okay, none being seen. The minutes are approved as submitted. Okay, so we're now going to move to the action items, and I would like to welcome the representatives from Aeronautic tonight, who will be giving us a presentation. Susan, and I think there was a somebody else from Aeronautic. Oh, Barbara. I'd like to welcome you both to HDSB, to our SEAC meeting, and to welcome you as you provide a presentation to us on the school-based rehabilitation services that you can provide to HDSB. Welcome.
Allison, thank you for the warm welcome. I'm going to see if Ami can share a presentation. Ami, are you able to do that? And I've had to turn my video off due to some problems with audio. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we are.
I see a little bit of nodding, so that is fantastic. Ami, are you having any success sharing your screen?
I am about to try.
Thank you.
1 second.
Much appreciated. So just to introduce myself a little further, I'm the Clinical Operations Manager for the School-Based Rehabilitation Services program at Aeronautic Kids. And I'm so pleased to have been joined by Ami and Barbara, who are our clinical services supervisors with the School-Based Rehab program at Aeronautic Kids. So Ami and Barbara are the key contact people for all of the school board staff, and are also the supervisors for the clinicians who are going into the schools. So, I can see the slide deck and I can see the slides up the side. I'm wondering if you do.
Sorry.
So just to let you know.
All right.
Is that better?
I'm just seeing you, Ami. Am I the only one?
Oh, let me try that again.
I saw the presentation when you had it up.
I was
Yeah,
able to
so-
see both as well.
It might be your screen view, Allison, if you go to the 3 dots at the bottom.
Okay, thanks.
Are you seeing the screen fully, Susan?
I'm seeing the screen as I saw it before, with the slide in the middle, but with still the panes down the side, which is fine. We can probably deal with it this way. Can everyone see the main slide?
Yes.
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 You could try doing start the presentation, but
I did.
you did. Okay, that's all right. Let's just pop up to the next screen, next agenda. So the next slide, which is the agenda.
Oop. So I think, Emmy, you stopped sharing.
Oh my goodness.
The joy that
I'm sorry,
is,
we
the
can
joy
use
that
Zoom
is
and
our
our
virtual
kids.
meeting.
So give me
Nope,
a second, I will
it's
get
your
there.
beautiful face and not that. So what we're going to be talking about this evening is just a little bit about the program. We'll be discussing family engagement, referral forms. We've had a new change in the referral form. I'd like to touch on the service delivery model, particularly occupational therapy, because there have been some changes there, and the virtual supports that we're providing due to COVID. Also provide just some information about how we're communicating with the school boards. So Ami, can you flip to the next slide for me? You are not flipping to the next
All right,
slide.
I can see the next slide. Are you not seeing it?
No, we're still seeing the agenda. Maybe do page down, see if that will change it for me.
I did.
Oh dear. Okay.
I'm very sorry. I will try one more time.
That is all right. So School-Based Rehab Services, it's a relatively new program for Aeronautic Kids. Aeronautic Kids began providing this program with Aeronautic Kids clinicians in September of 2020. And the implementation of that program and all of our time in the program to date has actually been during COVID. Prior to that, the program was provided by therapists through a third-party service provider organization, and that was originally managed by the local health integration networks, the LINs, and subsequently was transitioned from management to Aeronautic Kids in January of 2019. School-Based Rehab Services provides PT, OT, and speech in publicly funded schools. And for complex physical students, the same therapy team that provides those services in schools also provides services for home-based needs. Ami, could you try to forward to the next slide, which will speak a little bit to our family engagement.
Are you able to see it? I've done it.
We're still seeing, we are not. We are seeing guiding principles. I'm wondering if you're using two screens, Ami, perhaps disengaging the second screen. Aeronautic Kids has an electronic health record for documentation. This is different than what was previously provided by the third-party service provider organizations. And that means that all of our documentation is captured in an electronic health record. And parents can access their child's record and communicate with their therapist through the use of something called a family portal. Oh, Ami, you've got some helpful comments there in the chat. The family portal is called Aeronautic Connect. There, I can see the family engagement slide now. Thanks, Ami. So Aeronautic Kids Connect is the portal that ensures that personal health information is secure and the family can access their own treatment notes, their child's treatment notes, therapy resources, and information about their appointments on demand. There's a messaging system connected to the portal where the family can connect with their therapist, send their messages, and the therapist can respond. Can we try next slide, Ami? Great, we see the referral forms. So we have changed this school year, to an online referral form. So referral form is now completed through a secure online platform that's available on the Aeronautic Kids website. Those referrals for school-based rehab services are generated by school staff. And prior to that referral going in, consent is received from the family by the school board staff. It's important to note that speech referrals are completed by the school board speech therapist. Ami, can we transition to the next slide? So I'm going to be speaking to the model of service for occupational therapy, physiotherapy, and speech therapy in school-based rehab services. Where there's been a significant change is the provision of occupational therapy service. It was previously provided through the more traditional model where a clinician had a caseload and they worked their way through the caseload. It's now being offered through something called a tiered model of service to increase access for service to a larger number of students and to improve collaboration and knowledge transfer between educators and therapists. For any of you who are interested in the evidence behind the model, a significant amount of the research for this approach was produced by CanChild. They're the large research group right next door at McMaster. And there's a lot of really great detailed information about the tier model of service for OT on the CanChild website. The tiered model of service is represented by a pyramid, where the base of the pyramid is the largest for what's called universally applied concepts. And then there's a middle part of the pyramid that represents students who might need a little bit more support, a little bit more individualized or small group intervention. And the top of the pyramid represents specialized intervention for a relatively small number of individuals. Ami, can you forward the slide to show what that pyramid looks like? That's great. The literature shows us that 80% of students that we serve would benefit from class-based intervention, about 10 to 15% for that tier 2 model of intervention for small group or more specific individualized intervention, and 5% approximately require extremely specific intervention from their therapist. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit more about universal service. Ami, could you advance the slide? Maybe. Thank you. So universal service benefits all children within the classroom. So this is being offered at the primary level, typically kindergarten through grade 3. The teacher can have an occupational therapist come into the classroom and provide consultation to the class for that would be beneficial for all students within the class. It may look like changes to the classroom environment or some suggestions around methods or materials. It's done within the context of the classroom with the goal of increasing the capacity of the educator through knowledge transfer and translation from the OT, and also for the OT to really be embedded in the classroom and understand how the classroom is working as well, so that the information provided is relevant to the context of the classroom. Next slide, please. And the therapy team that does this service can be an occupational therapist, but also we have therapy assistants who can help at the direction of the occupational therapist. The frequency of the service depends on the size of the school and is done in conjunction with input from the special education resource teacher. Examples of things that can happen at this level, at the universal service level, are ideas like visual schedules for students, just rearranging things a little bit in the classroom to make it visually easier for students who perhaps need lines on the floor in order to line up successfully at the door, and can be small group activities with the occupational therapy providing some input around things like fine motor tasks. Could I have the next slide, Emmy? The middle section called tier 1 or tier 2. No, I'm still on tier 1. Where am I, Ami? Tier 2, thank you. Tier 2 is for students who need a little bit more support than what can be done universally in consultation to the classroom. These are specific strategies or skills to help them fully participate in the classroom. There is a referral required at this level. And what this can look like is intervention for things like fine motor. We've got some groups coming up for letter formation, lowercase letter formation, uppercase letter formation that are going to be done in a group format. So specifically targeting skills to help students succeed in the class. And in tier 3, that top level of service, or not of service, but of the pyramid, is for students who require very specific strategies and equipment for one-to-one skill development. It is more similar to the traditional model of therapy with outcome-focused intervention, and it's provided when needs arise rather than on a continuous basis. We know that children have varying needs at different times in their school career. Some students, particularly at points of transition, need more support from their therapist in order to make that transition successful. So the tier 3 is not provided on a continuous basis, but as needed, and that is done in conjunction, identified in conjunction with the school board staff. Barb, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
No, I feel like no, you've done great. So nothing to add.
Okay. Barb is by background an occupational therapist, so I typically check in with her when I'm talking about occupational therapy. We do have criteria for our therapists to help guide them in terms of when a student gets seen who has come into a caseload. The guidelines fall into urgent, priority, and standard. The urgent students who come through as an urgent referral typically require the visit from an occupational therapist in order to be able to attend school. An example of this would be a child who's just had a surgery and needs to have their equipment revisited prior to being able to go back into school. There are some other examples similar to that where the student really does need the support of a therapist prior to that first day of visit. The second category is priority, where a student perhaps needs new equipment to support their needs in the school, and they're typically able to access the school, but they have mobility equipment or accessibility needs while they're at the school environment, while they're in the school environment. This can look like the need for a standing frame, a floor chair, things that will help support their mobility and their positioning. And then the standard referral is where a student experiencing difficulties with written output, organizational skills, and they require consultation to maximize participation in activities of daily living and functioning. Can I have the next slide? Okay, so the next service I would like to speak to is physiotherapy. This does follow the more traditional model of a caseload approach, where a physiotherapist has a caseload of students and schools within a geographic area, and they see the students based on need for typically equipment needs, safety, and participation in the school environment and curriculum. That can look like mobility in the hallway or safety in gym class, safety outside. There are a significant number of physiotherapy children who are receiving physiotherapy who are also receiving that wraparound service where they're getting physiotherapy support from that same team in the home and potentially in services in the center. Next slide. The visit criteria for physiotherapy is very similar to the visit criteria for occupational therapy. Referrals come through flagged as urgent for the clinicians, where the student would really benefit from a day one visit with a physiotherapist or shortly thereafter to enable them to safely enter the school. Priority is where they have a piece of equipment or need a piece of equipment to support their physical needs. They are able to access the school, but they have some mobility and equipment or accessibility needs within the environment. And a standard referral requires consultation to maximize participation in gym class, in mobility on the playground, balance, coordination. Speech therapy services are similar to physiotherapy services, also have the caseload model where clinicians are provided with a caseload of students and schools in a small geographic area. The speech team includes speech language therapy assistants, SLTAs, who support students with moderate to severe fluency, articulation, phonology, and voice disorders. Service options that you may see with a speech therapist include individual intervention, home programming, or group intervention where applicable. We are seeing some group intervention happening, but it's limited right now, obviously due to the situation with COVID. But we do have some dyads that are happening within the board. Can I get the next slide? The school visit criteria for speech therapists. We have very few students who come through as urgent. We have had just a handful, and these are students who have had a post-operative referral and require urgent speech intervention. These are things like post-cleft palate repairs or vocal cord repair. We do have a priority category for severe disfluency or oral motor difficulties or childhood apraxia of speech, where there are secondary behaviors impacting social and emotional well-being. These are typically identified by the school board speech path who's making the referral. And then the third category is a standard referral, for which there's unfortunately a bit of a wait for students who are referred to the standard referral waiting list. Can I get the next slide? So as all of us have, we have pivoted during COVID and have really developed quite a menu of virtual care options. We use a platform called Zoom for Healthcare, and which is available for all distance learners. We are also using Zoom for Healthcare to have parents occasionally join a session upon request and with a good discussion with the school. We've also used the virtual platform for team meetings, for OT Tier 1 consultation for classrooms. That has occurred on days when a therapist is not particularly scheduled to be in the school. They have been able to do a team meeting with the teacher upon request. We provide virtual workshops for families and have also using the virtual care platform to do some tests that actually can't be done for speech when you're wearing a mask, which we're learning to do things in a totally new way. Can I get the next slide? Other ways we've used virtual care, the OT and PT sometimes works with a family and vendor to support strategies for curriculum access at home. The occupational therapist has done fine motor assessments for distance and online learners. And we've done virtual training for simple equipment in the home for virtual learners. There are some limitations to virtual care. We have found that some assessment and treatment can't occur for our students who are learning virtually. The tricky things for our weight-bearing activities for our physios in particular, or anything where we need to check how much movement is happening at the joints for use of equipment. We do need to arrange for that to happen in person. We have developed a nice menu of virtual workshops that are available on the Aeronautic Kids website. What I wanted to highlight for parents is One Bite at a Time. That's a workshop for children who are more selective eaters. We have a workshop for teaching daily living basic skills, developing communication, introduction to ABA, sleep solutions, and toilet learning. These are general workshops that are available either on demand or that parents can sign up for and join. Can I get the next slide? Also, with our new virtual exciting world, we have really been working hard with our communication with our school board partners. We did have something called encrypted email, which we have changed to a new platform called OneDrive. And OneDrive is how we share confidential information with our school board partners, including things like therapy notes, therapy assessments, and discharge reports that are needed by the school staff. Next slide, please. All of the staff at Aeronautic Kids have an attestation form that are available for the school to indicate the vaccination information that are required for the board. And Aeronautic Kids staff are provided with all PPE for the environment that they're in that meet or exceed school board guidelines. Right now, all of Aeronautic Kids staff are provided with N95 masks and goggles or visors. while they're going into classrooms. We don't expect that there'll be an N95 masks forever. We will be changing that back to the 3-ply as soon as the environment indicates that it's time. And finally, I just want to share, oh, look at that. My name is not on there. So I'm sharing Ami and Barb's contact information, the clinical services supervisors for the area, who are the contacts for the schools. Now we can stop sharing, and I'm wondering, Allison, if you want to take some questions.
Yes, that's great. Thank you very much for that presentation. That's wonderful. I can see we've got a hand up already. So Heather.
Thank you, through you, Allison. Susan, I'm wondering if we could get a copy of the slides, because we've got a trustee that wasn't able to make it today and is sadly missing it. She really wanted to hear your presentation.
Yes, Heather, I could do that. Who shall I send it through to? Allison, is that you?
Yes, if you send it through to me, I'll make sure that Heather and the trustees get it.
Thank you so much.
Yes, I can do that. No problem.
Great. Melissa.
Hi there. Hi, me in particular, and others. I just wanted to say, I feel like it's a sense of redundancy that anytime therapists go into the school, they have to call the parent in order to do a COVID screen. So if the student is already in the building and passed the school's COVID screen, it feels like, you know, there's a list of, you know, I don't know, 15, 20 questions that need to be answered. And if the parent isn't available on a phone call, then the visit can't happen. It just seems like a sense of redundancy for your organization, for your therapist to have to, frankly, waste or spend time calling parents prior to entering the building when they've already passed the COVID screening to be in the school. So I'm just wondering about that policy. It seems like, you know, it's frustrating for parents, to be honest, and it's frustrating, I would think, for therapists as well. So is there any talk about changing that?
Melissa, yes, the COVID screening is something that we discuss on a very regular basis. That COVID screening is a requirement of the college, all 3 colleges, speech, physio, and OT, that they have a confirmation of an active screen prior to going into the school. And we are aware that the students going into the schools right now are doing an active screen for the school. And at this point, the therapists do need confirmation of that active screen. So we are working to try to streamline that process as best we can. But it is a frustrating part of the COVID protocols right now. I hear you. It is very frustrating.
Well, because I can see if they're coming into the home, there's kind of another layer of support. But if there was any way that the school could share that, certainly for students that, you know, if the school could share that, that might be easier for everybody involved, because, you know, for a parent to be able to answer a phone call in the middle of the day when the therapist arrives, that sometimes can be very difficult. And again, if they can't answer that phone call and don't get the screening, then the visit doesn't occur. And that seems to be a waste of everybody's time. So that's what I would say. I mean, I completely understand when you're going into a home to do a home visit, but in the school environment, I think there's got to be a better way that the school board / organization can work together. But so that's the only advice I would give as a parent.
Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Great, thank you. And Catherine.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I get what she's saying. Like, I know in the past when, like, I work for, I'm an EA for the Peel Board. So we used to deal with Aeronautic. Aeronautic used to come into our school, and then it was Lynn. Even before COVID, I remember them either calling us, or even for myself as a parent with Halton, I'll get a call and saying, is your child sick or whatever? So I think it's still the same thing. I know sometimes our parents don't call the therapist. So sometimes we ourselves staff, we just let them know they're not here. I get what Melissa was saying. But I understand it's been the same. It's just kind of ramped up because of COVID. So I get where it's coming from. But in the past, like, we would get phone calls even the day before, has a child been sick or whatever. And we always remind the parent, if your child is sick, just let the therapist know that will be at school. So I think it's still the same, but it's just with COVID, it's much harder for sure.
Great, thank you. And Sarah.
Hi, yeah, I'm just wondering, I like the wraparound approach now that Aeronautic is back in the school, so that it's the home clinicians are the same as the school-based clinicians. I'm just wondering if there's sort of a general number of visits per year. Obviously, it's case by case would be individualized, but recognizing it's sort of a consultative basis. Is there sort of a general number of visits or an average number of visits per year? And is that now being combined like with the home visits, if that makes sense? So we were getting maybe 3 or 4 visits a year, just anecdotally, 3 or 4 visits a year at school by PT and OT, and then sort of maybe once or twice a year in the clinic. I'm just wondering sort of what the average is, or if caseloads have they dropped at all, I guess.
Sarah, what fantastic questions. We don't have, as I'm sure you can appreciate, we don't have a set number of visits, because it can take different visits depending on the need, right? If you have a student who has just grown and needs a new standing frame, a new walker, a new bath seat, everything in school and in home, it's based on need and the number of visits that particular presentation requires. So it's actually a little bit more flexible now, Sarah, that it's with Aeronautic Kids as opposed to a third-party provider. With a third-party provider, all the visits needed to be approved. And at this point, the guidelines are based around need and presentation of needs.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just sort of looking at a sort of a rough, but that makes perfect sense, kind of a rough estimate for parents, when they make the referral or are connected. But yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I can see that with the different equipment needs. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
you're welcome, Sarah.
Candice.
Thank you. Thanks for that great presentation, Susan. I just wanted to say firstly, Amy, you did a great job with that presentation. I know all too well the struggles of online presentation, so good job. Just a really quick question for you. Who can access your website resources? Is there a certain criteria that needs to be met, or is it generally open to the public?
Yeah, the website resources are generally open to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Heather.
This may be a ridiculous question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Who funds Aeronautic?
That's a fantastic question, Heather. Our primary funding comes through MCCSS. The majority of our funding comes through MCCSS. You, I'm sure, are very well aware that the autism program was defunded through MCCSS a few years ago, and now there is a portion of Aeronautic Kids that is fee for service, and that the funding for that comes from parents or from the Ontario Autism Program.
Thank you.
MCCSS though. Yes, that's all right. Did that answer the question okay?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. I'm forgetting there is a very small portion of our programs that are funded by the Ministry of Health. Those would be our physician-supported programs, and also we have a physiotherapy OHIP stream. That is MOH funding.
Okay, great. Thank you. Melissa.
I just want to clarify. I think I know the answer, but I think it is quite alarming for everybody to sort of understand too, is that once a student reaches past the age of 18 years old and they are no longer considered pediatric, but they're still enrolled in a Halton District School Board program, their service provider switches over to the LIN. Am I correct with that?
Almost. Yeah, Melissa, for all students who are in school, we service them in school until they exit. Okay. For some schools, for some children, that's 18, and for some students, that's 21. Right. So school-based rehab in schools does go through until the student exits school. but you are right. The in-center and home-based service ends when the student becomes an adult. So it ends at the age of 18. And it is quite a transition. And yes, a lot of their services then provided by the LIN.
And that just seems frustrating that then, you build a relationship with a therapy group, and they're still servicing in school, and yet the home-based care becomes new therapists. Is there communication between the LIN and Aeronautic in terms of therapy and continuity of care between home and school, or?
Yes. It typically, the therapists, they can get together and discuss what's happening home and school. Our therapists do endeavor as much as possible to exit the student at the age of adulthood with their home reasonably set up, right? Because the student has stopped growing, all of their equipment needs are hopefully met before they leave school. I see your face, you know that sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, a therapist can always connect with each other. It's a really good practice if you've got two physios involved or two OTs involved for them to connect to discuss what's happening in the two different locations. Barb, did you have anything that you wanted to add on that?
I feel like I don't really have anything to add, but we do really try to work with our complex kids very early on. We try, in theory, to begin that transition out of our services at 18, but it is a very different looking service. It isn't, like to your point, Melissa, the seamless service that we have at the Children's Treatment Center. So it is very, it's difficult, yes, but we do try, as Susan said, to really prepare and have as much in place as we can, but it's not ideal.
And I'm just saying, I think the complex care or the circle of care, I think has been great. It's a great addition to have the same therapist home and away. It just seems that those kids between the age of 18 and 21, I've actually reverted back to the old system where there was a set of therapists that came to home-based care, and then there was a separate set of therapists in school. And it just seems like that's those kids. I mean, there frankly isn't that many of them. I mean, they require a lot of service and they require a lot of funding by all means. If a student is in a school between the ages of 18 and 21, we know that there's a lot of needs required. But it just seems that small group of kids is really sort of, almost, left in the dark in terms of these new progressive positive changes. So I think that's definitely something I would bring back again to your organization, is that it's difficult enough, that transition outside. Yes, so I would bring back that feedback for sure.
Thanks, Melissa.
No problem.
And Heather.
I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions today on this topic. Going back to continuity of care, with Aeronautic, are they fairly seamless transitions when a child goes from elementary school to a middle school to the high school? Sometimes middle school doesn't happen, but certainly in Milton it does in some cases. So is Aeronautic, the team of Aeronautic, make sure that the continuity of care continues? And when they are discharged, is there a follow-up at a little later down the road, or are they just discharged and end of story until the school contacts again?
Okay, Heather, I'm hearing two different questions. So I'm going to start with what I think was your first question, and that's about transitions between programs, between schools. We are certainly always trying to improve this experience for families. We know that it's a hard time for students when they're transitioning into school, that early development, preschool, into school, and then in between schools. We work very closely with our preschool partners to make sure that that's a smooth transition with conversations happening between the therapists and joining the case conferences pre going into school. And the great thing about having an electronic health record is the receiving therapist can see the full record of what's happened with the student and connect back with that therapist to discuss the care and how to best serve that child. We are trying, when we're assigning caseloads, to do it geographically. So the The thought there is that the same therapist who's in the elementary school is also serving the high school. It doesn't always happen. We're still working towards this, but that would be the ideal, is that there isn't actually a change in therapist, that it's just a change in environment, that we're not there in all cases, but it's certainly something we're striving for. And where it doesn't happen, as I've said, the therapists are in good contact with each other to help transition that care. And I should have wrote down your second question, Heather. It was about discharge, I believe, and is discharge the end of the road? And do I have that correct? I paraphrased.
Yes, you're right.
Okay. And discharge does happen. And the nice news, though, is if a new need arises, the school can identify the new need and re-referral. With occupational therapy in particular, because of the new model, the occupational therapist is in the school more frequently. If the school board staff has a new need that's arisen, they can connect in with the OT, even informally, to say this is happening, and that referral can happen fairly smoothly, fairly easily. And for speech, there is an end to the episode of care where a student is discharged from service when they've reached the end of their episode of care. They can be re-referred if they still meet criteria to go back onto the waiting list for another session of service. Unfortunately, the discharge at the end of school, age 18 or 21, it is the end of services at Aeronautic Kids. And while we do get calls from parents and we do try to help direct them to the adult service, we can't provide service for students once they age out.
Thank you very much for answering.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions at this time? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, Amy, Barbara, and Susan, for coming in and talking to us and explaining so much about the work that Aeronautic does in our school system. I want to thank you on behalf of SEAC, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for having us, Allison. Take care.
Okay.
Yep, thank you very much. Bye.
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 Okay, great. Thank you very much for that, everybody. Obviously, a full discussion there. Following on from this presentation, we're moving on to item 2.2, and I think it's actually fairly apt. The Ministry of Education is asking for feedback on its proposed PPM 81, provision of health support services in school settings. Hopefully people have had a chance to review the document in advance, and I was just wondering if there's any feedback that we would like to provide as a SEAC to the ministry. Colette.
Allison, we have a couple of staff here. We have Brent Coquell, who's the principal of student health. We also have Terry Blackwell, who is the superintendent responsible for student health. And we have Christine Howard, who is manager of professional services. And Brent and Christine are going to do a little overview of kind of the current state of PPM 81 in Halton, what it looks like, and what the proposed changes are in the draft PPM. So if you're all right with that, I'll share my screen and I'll turn it over to Brent.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Colette. As we know, PPM 81 was first shared with boards back in 1984. Has had several memos updating that, but it is under revision, and they've shared this revised draft of this PPM and a framework for delivery of health services in schools, looking specifically at how it's provided, plans of care that are student-specific, plans for emerging medical interventions, and as it relates to community-based and clinical services for students with special needs. I'll speak to the first few, and then I know Christine will speak to some others. When we look at the current practices in HDSB in comparison to the PPM 81 proposed, there will be significant changes that would need to take place in order for this to even be considered for implementation. Administration of medications. Currently, we administer routine oral medication and emergency medication by oral, suppository, auto injection, and nasal mist. In the proposal, this would have this administration by injection by the student or parent, which a health professional, and school board staff as delegated by a health professional. And that's one of the bigger changes that's been highlighted in this proposed PPM. When we look at bladder expression and G-tube feeding, this is currently conducted by a nurse or from the LIN. This would again be by a health professional in some cases, or by school board personnel as delegated by a health professional. Catheterization, there's two different treatments that we have. Both are currently performed by a nurse in our system, through the LIN. And in the new proposal for PPM 81, this would have a health professional or school board personnel as delegated, again, for that. And for sterile intermittent, that would be done continue by a health professional. Currently suctioning as well. We do not have any staff completing that. That is done by a LIN nurse for both shallow surface suctioning as well as deep suctioning. In the proposal, it would have school board personnel performing shallow suctioning and deep suctioning being done by health professionals. So these are considerable changes that would impact operations and how we deliver service and support to students in our schools. And with that, I'll turn it over to Christine to speak about some of the other services impacted by this proposal.
So again, there are some fairly significant changes on the rehab side of things, whereas the original PPM 81 really only covered OT, PT, and speech. Because MCCSS is involved, as you were asking, Heather, about who funds, MCCSS is the funding behind the OAP program, so they've decided to include all OAP services in that as well. So when we're looking at services in terms of lifting and positioning. Again, right now, the current practice, so this is related to OT, so the current practice around lifting, positioning, assistance with mobility, feeding, and toileting is the training is provided to our staff by Aeronautic Kids because they have the SBRS contract. And then in the proposed PPM, the training is to be provided by the school board. And I think one of the proposals is even that parents would provide that training, which could have some problems. In terms of school-based rehab services, so as we were just discussing, speech, OT, PT, and now it has actually includes the BA services. Sorry. Which acronyms? Sorry.
So I guess the acronym, the MCSS, which I guess Ministry of Children,
Community and Social Services.
Yep.
Sorry.
And Tracy, just to clarify again, what the other acronyms?
Which one? OT?
There was just a whole bunch of them in one sentence. It's like its own language. And I know some people are totally familiar with it, and that's cool. Sometimes I'm going, what is that?
OAP, Ontario Autism Program. Is that one that I used? MCCSS, Ministry of Community Social Services, OT, Occupational Therapy, PT, Physiotherapy. Were there more? Sorry, I apologize.
The LIN, which would be the Local Health Integrated Network. The LIN, we often refer to that.
Yeah, so right now, like I say, for school-based rehab services, SBRS, which is the Aeronautic Kids is the current provider for speech, OT, and PT, because again, the Ministry of Community, Children and Social Services is the funding behind the Ontario Autism Program, which includes childhood family budgets for families. They are proposing that all services, including behavior, speech, language, occupational therapy, and physiotherapy, take place within the school board. So right now, that would allow these providers to come into the classroom and into our schools. And again, it would be any private service. that would download a lot of responsibility onto the schools and onto the principals specifically to ensure that all the conditions for those people coming into our schools are met. It would increase lots of meetings for teachers because as you can imagine, if there's a number of students receiving private services, there could be potentially quite a few private practitioners, especially in a district the size of Halton, able to try to come into the school and wanting to access space and time in the classroom or time in the school. And wanting to have input into the students' educational program. This would be challenging on a number of fronts, including people coming into the school board that don't really have the perspective necessarily of the processes and the models and the service delivery methods that are being used within the school board. Certainly that collaboration would be very difficult for that number of private providers in the school with teachers and certs, for example. And it would make it difficult to provide consistent support to some of our students, especially in some of our self-contained classes. The other piece is there's significant equity of access concerns for some of the students. Some of the funding is provided only through one particular diagnosis, as opposed to there will be other students, for example, students with Down syndrome or students with fetal alcohol syndrome who are not eligible for those same types of privately funded services. And it will make it challenging for principals to have those conversations with families about why some children are able to receive services in the education system and not others. In addition, we are concerned about equity of access issues for parents who are linguistically, financially, or culturally not able to access some of those services, including access to family physicians and things like that. There's long wait lists for some services. So there are quite a number of concerns with the provision of all of these services within the school setting, most of which, again, are concerns around equity, safety, the principal, the relationships between the schools and the families, and the number of service people there would be to coordinate in terms of providing access and the difficulty with providing consistent service delivery within the classroom and within some of our self-contained programs. The other piece that Brent mentioned is that actually including nursing supports, the agencies would actually be, or the parents would actually be encouraged to use their private funding if they qualify for LHIN, so Local Health Integration Network funding for nursing care. They would actually be encouraged to use their publicly funded private nurses within the school system, which also is another private person coming into the school, which could have some issues. I think that's the most of what I have to share. If you have any questions, I'd certainly be happy to take them.
Okay, thank you very much. Heather, you have a question.
Well, it's not necessarily a question. It's more like my opinion on all of this, if that's okay, through you, Chair.
Recently.
I cannot and will not get behind any of this. And I guess you're feeling that I'm pretty strong about this. Our staff are not health providers. And B, our principals and VPs, our admin people are not folks that are in the business of organizing healthcare professionals. We are educators. We are in the business of educating. And this is absolutely, I read it a few days ago, and then I read it today and I was shaking my head. And the more I hear about it, I don't know. I'm very disappointed that this would even be put in writing. And so whatever needs to happen, I'm there. I can't see our union partners agreeing to any of this. I see work refusals. The list goes on. Anyway, my rant is over. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Heather. Catherine.
Just to talk with Heather, like as Heather's saying, like in EA as well. And in the past, I've worked in a medically fragile class for 7 years. So a lot of that, like the PPM 81 is very familiar to me because that's what we had to base a lot of our things that we do. For example, the G-tube feeding, we didn't do the actual feeding, we did the water. So we were trained by a public health nurse, or one of the nurses from St. Elizabeth. This was through PO, so I'm pretty sure it's different with Halton. And they came in and physically trained us how to do water bolus. Some meds were like we had to crush it. A lot of it, because it's a medically fragile class, that's what our class was surrounded by, like seizure protocols, all that, PT, OT. The nurses, it did came from Lynn, or it never came from private funded. Last time I worked in a medically fragile was 2013. A lot has changed. I don't agree with the privately thing because a lot of families don't have access to that, and they're still waiting for funding. So it's coming out of their own pockets, which is very, very little. So I don't agree with some of it, but there's some that EAs can still do because that's part of our training as well. It's not just, usually teachers are not allowed based on their union things. I know some teachers I've worked with kind of help out, but technically they're not supposed to. But as an EA, that's part of our job. We are trained to do that. Part of our requirements is to feed them, but water bolus, OT, PT, exercises, everything. It's all based on the type of student you're working with, and then the needs they present, because they should be at school, and they have every right to be at school. So sorry, that's just my opinion on that, because I've been an EA for almost 20 years, and this is what I do on a daily basis. So that's just me. Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. Melissa.
I just think we've had two different perspectives here, and like it's shocking to me. It's shocking. It's so sad to me that we're asking our educational assistants, who are paid a fraction of what our teachers are getting paid, to do this kind of work. When really, I mean, these students, I 100% agree with you, belong in school. They have a right to an education, but they're, even the OTPT that we just sort of heard the presentation from, the fact that OTPT maybe come into the school 3 times a year, and somebody is getting a salary off of, having a certain kid on their caseload, and the person administering all the PT, OT, speech therapy is in fact EAs. So when we look at the, and yes, they have more kids in their caseload, they're serving a consultation type of role, but in the trenches, the people that are keeping these students alive, the people that are keeping these students fed, toileted, all of that are the least paid members of our staffs, and that's not okay. It's not okay to continue to accept that the government is going to downgrade. We need to pay our EAs appropriately when their quality of work, the difference, I mean, I'm an educator as well. I'm a teacher in a school, and I know there's a difference from an EA that is assigned to a class to deal with students with, LDs and to deal with students with some learning difficulties and behavior issues. And I know the students that have to, and I know the EAs that have to change diapers. They have to, as you were saying, provide G-tube feeds, or at least bolus, water flushes. There is that is a medical, that is a nursing role, and we're asking people to do that nursing role for a fraction of the cost, and I don't think that's okay.
I completely understand. Like, trust me, I love to have a bump in pay because I literally work like pretty much if it was poverty line, as if you would look at it now, especially with the cost of living skyrocketing. But because I am a mom with 3 special needs kids, I look at it as I want to do what's best for that child, and I don't want them to feel left out or needs taken away. So I come from what if that was my child? And I've a lot of times focused on that because I know what it's like. They don't have the medically fragile diagnosis, but I want to make sure that they are safe. As you said, that's part of our rules. trust me, I think we should have somewhat more of pay. And I know the government's going to say no, 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 but I love it because it'll help with the bills. But it's hard because it's a very catch-22, and we want the best for the students. We want them to be safe. We want to give them everything that they rightly deserve. And you come home, you're tired, you have your own families, you have your own needs. But I guess I'm very much of a different I totally agree with you, Melissa. Trust me, I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. But
I
that's
come
not
with
an
a
issue.
perspective.
To be honest, that's just people taking advantage of certain members of our, and they continue to do so, and allowing that medical care to be provided, to take the nursing care out of schools. The number of students we've heard in the media over the last, certainly with COVID, that haven't been able to access school because no nursing care is provided. I mean, there has to be somebody that sticks up for these children and assures them the right to an education. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, yes, you're next.
Hi, thanks. I agree. It's an incredibly fine line. And yeah, I won't go down that road. But anyway, I was really just wondering, in terms of if policy is going to be developed from these recommendations or from the draft, will SEAC members have an opportunity to provide feedback or bring it back to the group for larger discussion? Because I can see like there's definitely different perspectives and sort of feedback. And I was just wondering, thanks.
Sorry, Colette, do you want to answer that question? Yep.
Yes, thanks. And that's a great question, Sarah. And absolutely, there's a role for SEAC to play in the process that we'll be undertaking, if and when this PPM is finalized, to update our procedures related to the service delivery models in the board. One of the challenges that we will face, however, is the time frame. So the implementation date at this point is September 2022. And the domino effect of changes impacts a number of our administrative procedures. It would require a significant consultation process with our key stakeholders, including our unions. And to Heather's point, that will certainly be, an important consultation process for us to undertake, as well as, of course, with SEAC. And then the memorandum of understanding that we have with the likes of Aeronautic Kids, because the model of service would change for them as well. Sorry, and I'm drawing a blank on the other memorandum of understanding that we would need to look at. But so there would be a significant amount of work to get done by the implementation date if this goes forward as is.
And I just want to add in there, I mean, unfortunately from the ministry, I think the deadline for the feedback at this stage is the 18th of February. So it's been a very rushed process. The documents only came out, a week or so ago. I was made aware of them. And so the whole consultation process, I believe, has been shortened considerably from what might have been appropriate. So in terms of your question, Sarah, of our ability as a SEAC to provide information before PPM changes take place, it's kind of now.
It wasn't so much, I understand that piece. And I know Easter Seals itself, the SEAC group is putting together a document for feedback. But it was more along the lines of when it's passed sort of thing or implemented, any policy that HDSB creates based on it is sort of what I was hoping that SEAC would have a role, a consultative role in. But no, I clearly hear, I know it's very soon. And I appreciate that. Thanks, Alison.
Okay, great. Thank you. Tracy.
Thank you. And through you, Allison, I was going to also ask about a process piece. So we hear that the deadline is February the 18th. And will staff be submitting in response to this? There are just so many things in here that seem problematic, not the least of which is the implementation timeline, as you've pointed out, Colette, and safety of students in transitions. You know, sometimes when you have to switch things very quickly, it makes it even more difficult. So with students at the heart, yes, will staff be submitting? And then as trustees, we only have one meeting between now and then as well, but it seems like this is also an area where we can hear what SEAC is saying, because I do believe that you're all agreeing. You came at it from different perspectives, but generally you're saying similar things. So anyways, what's the process? What are we going to do here? Because if nobody says anything, sure as anything, this is going to be issued in fairly short order. But I think with some collaborative pushback, maybe at least it can be delayed.
So if I could respond to that. So two things. One is that Brent and Christine both participated in a virtual consultation meeting yesterday. And certainly they can share some highlights from that process with you if you'd like. And secondly, Terry and I have a draft written feedback to the ministry on our agenda with the senior team tomorrow, and then it will go to the director. So it is our intention that we will submit something in writing with the support of the senior team. I believe the deadline is Friday, the 11th, Allison, unless you got something different. But.
Okay, and I may be mistaken. So, so even shorter.
Yeah.
And Brent, did you want to add on to Colette's comments, or did you...
I'm just happy to share a little bit of what we shared, very similar sentiments with the team in our consultation yesterday. There was great concerns we had around implementation and the timelines for the implementation and wanting to support students. So the points raised here were very much echoed in our feedback session and very strongly worded to the province around big areas of concern we had with what was put forward as the draft. Hopefully I've captured that correctly, Christine, but it was a very interesting feedback session.
Yeah, I would agree. Very, very strongly worded statements from a variety of superintendents and principals from across the province. So it's very interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Margot.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So just wondering, with this being such a short timeline and it really going through on the 11th, which is Friday, as being the deadline, and if it does go through, are there opportunities for Halton to put its own spin on how we work with the guidelines? So although this is what they're saying, is there a way to be creative in the way we implement, is my question.
Yeah, and certainly there's always an opportunity to build our procedures and memorandum of understanding within our own context. And there is a caveat in the PPM around local collective agreements, and the local collective agreement clauses, if anything contradicts the PPM, that the collective agreement trumps it. I think one of the issues, though, that is a barrier for really an HDSB protocol is that much of the work is delegated to board staff by a health professional. And so it leaves kind of little authority with the school board to decline the service or to say that the board is incapable of providing the service when it when the authority rests with the health provider to delegate the task to the board. So yes, we can kind of, of course, we will have to develop our own Halton procedures, but it will be within the context of the decision makers, which, as the PPM is written, is largely not the school board.
But then quickly follow up and back to Heather's point in the beginning, with all the partners in play, all the unions and those sort of things, will there not be great pushback, not only from within the school, but within the workforce? Like, I'm thinking unions and things, saying no. And then what do we do? Coming back to, and she's gone, she went to pick up her son at Scouts, but we always want to be able to provide all children with the opportunity to access. It's their right to have education. So if we're having all this pushback and all this fighting in the background, where does that leave the kids is always kind of my question. So
yes, and to the point around the unions and in our collective agreements, all of our collective agreements, with the exception of the agreement with our educational assistants, have language in them that precludes them from providing health supports to students, or routine health supports. Certainly all of our staff provide emergency care. And so it will fall in all likelihood to our educational assistants to provide the services that are outlined in the PPM. And so we will, of course, be working with HADIA, which is our educational assistant union, through the implementation process.
Tracy.
Thank you. And I'm going to try to be mindful not to co-opt this as a trustee meeting. I am, just in terms of the feedback timeline, there's some issues with that around authentic engagement and what the ministry's expecting is possible for school boards to give them back. Yeah, I just, again, wonder what we can do as a group here or as trustees to support staff in giving this feedback. Because again, there's lots of issues here. Training, funding, is there any funding attached to? Okay, no. So this is a matter of, it rolls downhill and we're getting, it's landing at school boards. And this is very, very unfortunate. And just details like privacy for students that aren't being provided with service, but all of a sudden all these new people are coming into the school and into classrooms. Like, this is a whole school, a whole board issue, really. So I'm not sure where to leave it, except that I don't know if it would be helpful through the chair to write a letter, through Allison, chair of SEAC, and Margot, chair of the board, to ask for more time, or to give them some thoughts around authentic engagement on such a critical issue. I'd be happy to assist in any regard. Thanks. And I'm trying to be real diplomatic, but really, this is just rotten. This is rotten.
I'd certainly, as chair of SEAC, be very open to putting forward any feedback or our feedback. I will let Heather and Christine ask a question, and then ultimately I'd just like to ask our SEAC members if there's actually anybody who supports this PPM, because I mean, if we unanimously oppose it, then I think that's worth putting in a letter. I mean, if we're divided or we don't feel we've had time to process it, that's also something that we need to put in. But I just wondered if there's, even at this very short time frame, there's any feedback we can give. As somebody who doesn't have a medically fragile child, I can't imagine some of these feeling very comfortable as a parent, having some of these tests undertaken by somebody who's not medically trained. But that's just me. Heather.
Thank you. There are so many questions. Through you, Chair, to Brent and Christina. When you had a meeting yesterday, were you able to ask about the equity piece? That just blows me away too. Some parents, some kids can afford it and some can't. There's so many levels of wrong, and HDSB is all about equity. So I can't see this being a good thing for our students either. I'll leave it at that. I've got so many questions, and there's not enough time to get this done.
Christine, do you want to speak to the equity issues that were raised in the consultation process?
Yeah, I was just going to say that definitely was raised, again, quite strongly across the board. And again, Brent and I were only in one of the breakout rooms, but if the other breakout rooms paralleled what was shared in our meeting, certainly the equity issues were raised quite loudly. And Tracy, to your point, also, the other point I was going to make was that the lack of transparent consultation was also mentioned, or lack of authentic consultation with the boards was also mentioned to the ministry. So hopefully that did come across as well.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on there. Yolene.
I just, I really, this is a very interesting topic. And although, I don't have experience and to speak to, and but I have a question. And because, from what Brent and explained, with the proposed PPM 81, Aeronautic seemed to be the only service provider that the board will allow, or other service providers that the board will be required to work or give access to.
Christina, I think this is your specialty. I'll let you answer that one if you're okay with that.
Sorry, are you talking about, so with the current PPM, Aeronautic Kids is the only provider that's is providing those services. In the revised PPM, it would not only be Aeronautic.
Okay, so the board will be working with a number of service provider and giving access and for those professionals. Okay.
Correct.
So my second question perhaps is for Colette. So it looks like this process is really rushed, and so the government just want to push this through, and so consultation is really just a show, and but so with all our opposition to this proposed PPM 81. So what if this PPM 81 actually came to effect? What implications of this would have on the board's special education services that we currently have?
Well, that's a great question, Yolene. So, there are a number of significant impacts. First being that not all of our students who receive medical support through a nurse currently receive support from an educational assistant. So with the tasks being transferred to the board responsibility, we would likely be needing to look at our current educational assistant complement and redistributing that complement to ensure that students with medical supports have access to an educational assistant. So that will draw from the service available to students with significant special education needs. In terms of our occupational therapy, our current model is that we receive training from an OT through Aeronautic Kids. We don't have any occupational therapists in the school board. the PPM would assign that responsibility to the school board, and it would then require us to hire occupational therapists that will come out of our special education funding. So that would be an added expense to our schools. In terms of access to speech and language services, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, I think the access to service will increase for many students. But to the point that was raised here, it would increase to those who can afford it, because while Aeronautic will continue to provide a service, people may also send in their private therapists to provide service. And so that creates a real discrepancy in terms of the available supports to students with special education needs, and ultimately a disruption to schools in attempting to accommodate the private providers in the educational setting. So, a potential impact on students beyond special education. And then I think the final piece, and Terry, feel free to jump in if I've missed anything, or Brent or Christine or Sean, I know Sean's here as well, is, the nursing support that is to be provided, continue to be provided through the LHIN, the Local Health Integrated Network. But we know that there are significant staffing shortages as a result of the pandemic. I don't imagine that those staffing shortages are going to change. And so the LHIN would have the authority to require families to use their funds that they receive for home nursing supports to assign the nurse to a school setting. So that would be a private nurse in the school setting, which would allow the student to attend school, which would ultimately be our goal. But a real concern about our families who are already very vulnerable, and to a point that was made by, I forget who, around the kind of the expensive costs associated to having students with significant special education needs, and for those families to have to redirect their nursing dollars so that their child can attend school is really a fundamental challenge for us. Christine, Brent, Terry, Sean, anything to add to that?
Thanks, Colette. And so is there any possibility for the board, and I know that the budget is coming up and for discussion and, and all of that. So as a result of this change, or, the change down the road, and so would there be a discussion or, allocation or request to the government and, for the budget increase because of, the impact would have the board, special education services, the personnel, the training, and everything?
Yes, certainly that's in our written feedback, is to ensure that the funding is provided to support the services that will be added to the board responsibilities. The challenge is that we will receive our funding very shortly. I think that the ministry has said that it will come out sooner, the GSNs, than usual. And so the timelines around the PPM being released and the funding model don't align for the ministry. If they took the feedback from boards across the province, the funds will have already been set, and school boards would have already developed their budgets for the year.
Okay. Thank you, Colette.
James.
Yes, I just wanted to say that. Sorry, I just wanted to say that about 6 years ago, I served as an executive member on our union, and there was a case where a student was brought into our school, and I don't feel like the student was quite ready. I mean, she was literally brought in on a gurney with, a feeding tube and several IVs, and I think she had 2 nurses and 2 EAs So there is a problem where, you know, the student might not even be ready to be back in the school. So that's what I saw when I first read the report, was that, you know, there should be some guidelines in terms of when the student is, you know, ready to be learning again, you know, and this is what we were all discussing in the union was how could we support the teacher who felt overwhelmed. There had to be at least 2 nurses and a couple of EAs in this small classroom all of a sudden, and it really was a huge adjustment for her. So it's something to consider. I mean, if a student is getting occupational therapy and is getting some kind of mobility or you know is finished surgery and there's not, you know, the drainage tubes and stuff, this is fine. But I can see this, there could be a slippery slope where the student is brought back into the school too soon.
Great, thank you, James. So I don't know, just trying to work out how we proceed right now, being mindful of the time and the fact that we do have until Friday to provide some feedback. Obviously, it sounds as if the school board will be providing its own feedback. The trustees, I presume, will be providing feedback. My question is, does SEAC want to provide feedback? And if so, are we opposed unanimously to this? Are our people asking for more time for a discussion? Perhaps if I put the first question, is there anybody here who would not oppose this? So I'm trying to work out how to does everybody oppose this? Or is there anybody here who would say that maybe perhaps with modifications, this would be okay? So perhaps if we all, so rather than put everybody opposed, could anybody put in the chat if they do not oppose this motion or are not in a position to make a decision at this time? Okay, so I am not seeing anything. So, so James is saying it needs more time to be able to make a decision on this. So perhaps our SEAC feedback would be that we need more time in order to make a decision. But at this point in time, nobody is able to support this PPM without further consultation. Would that be a fair reading of this meeting? Is there anybody who would like to, I guess the first thing is, would anybody like us to put forward a response to the ministry as SEAC? Would anybody like to motion that? Melissa. So Melissa, if you motion, and Mark, you second. If anybody would like to oppose the motion that provides feedback as SEAC, please could you do so in the chat? Okay, at this time, be it noted that SEAC has unanimously decided to provide feedback to the ministry. At this time, based on James's comments, would anybody like to motion that we are unable to accept the recommendations in PPM without more time to review the impact? Or would anybody like to put forward a different motion?
I think if it has to be unanimous, it's you know, I'm to be honest, I've looked into this long and hard as a mother of a medically fragile kid. I'm never going to be in agreement of it. So I don't, you know, that I understand that more people might require more time, but that I'm opposed to this motion today, tomorrow, next week.
Okay. Well, we can take a vote. As SEAC, we can take a vote as to whether, would anybody like to motion that as SEAC, we send in a recommendation to the ministry that we oppose this motion, oppose this PPM modification? Mark, you're willing to propose that we oppose PPM 81 as drafted? Sorry, Diane. Diane. I was wondering who Mark was. Okay, Diane, and Melissa, you second that. So at this point in time, the motion in front of SEAC is that as SEAC, we oppose the modifications to PPM 81 as drafted. Does anybody want to abstain or oppose that motion? Not seeing anyone, it is unanimously passed that we will submit feedback to the ministry that the HDSB SEAC is unanimously opposed to the modifications to PPM 81 as currently stands. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on now, and we're very mindful of everybody's time. We have one last thing which kind of links in, which is that Lakehead District School Board sent a letter to the Ministry of Education asking for consideration that EAs be paid more in order to align more closely with the fact that outside the school board system, they are able to gain employment as personal support workers and are able to obviously be paid more, thus making it difficult for the school board to retain educational assistants. So their letter outlined that they would like the ministry to look at increased funding for educational assistants. The question I have for SEAC is, would we like to send a similar letter? Would anybody like to motion that we send a similar letter, or are we okay leaving it? So Melissa?
Yes, I'd like to promote.
You'd like to promote that, and Sarah, yes. Okay, so again, putting forward the motion that HDSB SEAC sends a similar letter to the ministry advocating that EAs, that the funding for EAs is reconsidered to allow school boards to pay them equivalent levels to they'd be able to obtain externally. Is anybody opposed to that? Okay, yeah, yes, with a, okay. Just seeing the clarification there from James. Anybody opposed to the motion? Okay, not seeing any. The motion is passed, and I'll send a letter confirming our support for Lakehead Public District School Board. Okay, welcome, Lucille. And we're now at item 3.0. We have approximately 20 minutes left. Just to ask anybody if there's any questions from anybody at SEAC at this time. Sarah.
Hi, just I hope a quick one. I'm not sure, but I saw the director's series on I think it was inclusion. Bear with me here. The director's panel series on identity, inclusion, and human rights. I think it's wonderful. I just, I don't know if this is appropriate forum or whatever, but just sort of wanted to raise that that people with disabilities, visible, invisible, whatever, also be included in that sort of discussion. I don't know if that's a plan. It wasn't one of the ones listed. But I think as a community, people with different needs can often be overlooked. And I think it's important to raise that. But But yeah, that was it. Thank you. Oh, and sorry. And Allison, can we all get a copy of that Aeronautic? No, I don't know if everyone wants it, but I think that would be helpful to just sort of refer back to in future.
Yes, I'm sure that's probably fine. We'll ask Aeronautic if we're able to distribute it when they send it over.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions at this time?
Sorry, Allison, can I respond to Sarah's
Yes.
question?
Sorry, yes.
So Sarah, thanks for raising that. And I know that Director Ennis has been asked by a few different groups around a discussion session with that particular identity, and so his response is that this is just the beginning, and that there is a plan for additional sessions leading into the next school year, and that he hopes to engage with a diverse range of groups and identities. I will share SEAC's feedback on and abilities focus, or people with disabilities, so that he knows that was a request specific from SEAC. But given that the series is starting this late in the year, only a few could get done, but there's plans for more.
That's great to hear. Thanks. I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other questions at this time? No, okay. And Lorna, do we have any questions from the public?
No.
Okay, great, thank you. So we're now at item 4.0, this communications to SEAC, and we'll start with the superintendent's report. So Colette, if you could provide us with any further updates to your report that was sent out, that would be great.
Certainly. And in the interest of time, I won't speak to the items that were circulated, as I know those will be reflected in the meeting minutes and that you received that in advance, but a couple of additions. The PPM 167, which is the policy program memorandum related to the online learning requirements. So you may recall that this came out last year in draft, and it has now been finalized. It does require that students effective last year, so our current grade 10 students, are required to take 2 online courses throughout their high school years in order to receive their secondary school diploma. In addition to the final version of this PPM is that there is an opt-out clause that any parent can opt out of this requirement, or any student 18 and over. So the board is currently reviewing the PPM and developing an implementation plan. So there'll be certainly more to come on what this looks like in Halton. But I will also add that because our grade 9s last year did ultimately receive almost whole credit through remote learning due to the school closures, they are able to bank one of their required credits as a result. So our current grade 10s only need to do 1 more. Our current grade 9s will have 2 to do by the time that they graduate. So as I said, more to come on that. And the Student Wellbeing Department is hosting a number of sessions on student mental health. And one in particular that I'll draw your attention to is a session on neuro-inclusive mental health. And so this really ties closely to the students and children that we serve. And that's on March 3rd from 7 to 8 p.m. But you can learn more about all of the sessions on our board's website.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? No. Okay, so now moving on to the association reports. Are there any associations that would like to provide a quick report? No. Well, then for the Learning Disabilities Association, just quickly like to remind you that The 11th annual Solutions for Learning conference is taking place on March 4th and 5th. We have 16 speakers talking on a range of topics related to learning disabilities, mental health, ADHD, social emotional learning. If anybody is interested, please just go to our website and you'll find more information. Thank you. All right, so at this point, it's the trustees' report.
Thank you. I will start first. Just let me click it on. Okay. So the 2022-2023 school year calendar was approved by trustees on February the 2nd and now has to be submitted to the Ministry of Education for approval. School starts on September 6th. 3 ministry mandated professional activity days will likely be devoted to mathematics, health, and safety training for education workers. Apropos, equity, student well-being, de-streaming, and gap closing strategies as a result of the pandemic. The 4 PA days will be focused on board priorities. The board also received the 2020-2021 annual accessibility report with similar information presented to us, SEAC, not so long ago. The 2021-2022 capital priorities funding approval for Milton Southeast number 13 elementary school and Oakville Northeast number 1 high school has been received. Myself and Trustee Daniele were present for the press conference announcement for the Milton number 13 school, which will be located James Snow and Louis Saint Laurent area. The public input for the naming of Milton number 11 has closed, and the naming committee will be meeting this week to begin the process. And then it goes to the Board of Trustees for decision. And on Monday, this past Monday, yesterday, pardon me, students and staff finally moved into Elsie McGill Secondary School in Milton. So that's pretty exciting, and I will be going to tour it on Thursday just to check it out. Full school isn't open because it will be under construction for a couple more months, but the school staff and students are going to be very safe even though construction is continuing. And I'll pass it on to Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. Hello. Just a few more quick points here. Recent advocacy to the province has included a letter from January 7th from the Board of Trustees encouraging vaccine prioritization for education staff and students, and also a return to in-person learning. And the letter was acknowledged by Premier Ford. And both of these things have happened. January 7th feels like a lifetime ago now. Trustees have their first budget workshop tomorrow night, and there'll be a public survey launched shortly and a SEAC session planned, I believe, in May to look at the draft budget and get feedback. So people, you're all encouraged to participate in that survey as well. Next year's budget is again surrounded with much uncertainty from what we understand so far. And there may be gaps related to ending of COVID-related support, which included additional staff positions as well as supplies. So we'll have to see how we can make all of that work. Nextly, the Halton District School Board is working with the City of Burlington to move forward with next steps in the City of Burlington's purchase of the board's former Robert Bateman High School property, which was on New Street in Burlington. On June 21st, trustees approved the plan to relocate Gary Allen Learning Center to Robert Bateman and declare the remainder of that high school facility surplus to needs. In September of this past year, the City of Burlington expressed their interest in acquiring that property. and providing the board with a 25-year lease to accommodate Gary Allen, which provides adult, alternative, and continuing ed programs and language instruction programs for newcomers, including, among others. And there's also, I believe, part of the press release indicated that Brock may be part of that through the city of Burlington as well. It's certainly been in some of the media that I've read. And then lastly, trustees have had a couple of professional development sessions recently, one on Robert's Rules of Order, so we can continue to learn about boardroom decorum and how to get through some of these really tricky things and come out with good and robust decisions that stand the test of time. And the other one was governance and operations, because as you may know, and this has been very tricky for me throughout this position, is there's a difference between governance, which is what trustees are responsible for, so that policy direction piece, and operations, which is what staff is responsible for. So we've been working on that and how to do it all collaboratively in the best interest of students and certainly staff and the community as well. Happy to take any questions, Allison.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? No. Okay, so moving on now to committee reports. We've got a list of standing committees, and just ask if there are any updates from the Parent Involvement Committee. Not at this time. Okay, the Accessibility Coordinating Committee.
We have a meeting coming up next week, so perhaps for the following meeting.
Great, thank you, Lucille. Equity and Inclusive Education Advisory Steering Committee. Diane, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I turned my camera on and then forgot. My camera's facing upside down again. Forgot to turn my mic on. The Equity Committee has not met yet, but we have one slated for, in the next couple of weeks.
Great.
So I'll report next month.
Great, thank you, Diane. And Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy Steering Advisory Committee.
So the committee met on January 13th, and our trustee Heather was present in the meeting as well. So that was the first meeting and the committee held. And so just give an overview and getting some feedback and from all the representative and of the students, teachers, and different stakeholders. So just so the mental health information and is available on Halton District School Board website, and so if anybody interested and can check it out. And there are also sessions planned and for parents and students, and one of the session actually is going to be tomorrow, and the topic is on vaping. And there are, I believe, a couple of days ago, the board also sent out an email to the parents and the students regarding those mental health sessions. And so there are also upcoming sessions, and one is building executive function skills in teenagers, which will be on April 5th, and another one will be on identity, race, mental health, and well-being, which will be on April 27 or 28, supporting 2 LGBTQIA students, which will be on May 17th. And all those sessions are held in the evening, and they are available virtually, and they will not be recorded, and because of the privacy and the issues. So if people are interested, and so you can check out the board website and or watch out for the email from the board. That is the report.
Great, thank you very much, Yolene. Okay, and here we go. So I think that's the last of our updates. Just asking if there are any items for item 5.0, our next agenda. I believe that next month we have an update from one of the teams on literacy programs. But is there anything else that anybody would like to have added to the agenda at any point in the future? If so, please feel free to reach out to me or Lucille, and we will discuss having it added to the agenda going forward. With that, we have now reached item 6.0, and at the stroke of 8:58, we are ready to adjourn our meeting. So thank you very much for another fulsome discussion. I think it's been a very cohesive meeting with lots of different aspects of the same kind of topic. And again, a very full discussion. So thank you very much for your participation, and look forward to seeing you all at our next meeting. Take care and have a good evening.